Hello everyone, I'm James Snowden, and I'm doing The Triumph and Tragedy of Henry Ford's Assembly Line. Thank you. Henry Ford modified transportation history when he founded the Ford Motor Company in Detroit, Michigan in 1903. Ford's assembly line automated car production was a triumphant invention because it subsequently had a significant influence on many other manufacturing industries. Furthermore, this unique method increased productivity of cars made and the profit for Ford's company. Unfortunately, automation tragically led to the decrease of skilled laborers in the workforce and replaced them with unskilled workers that had little to no experience and could easily be replaced. This led to the skilled laborers losing their jobs and becoming broke even though they had the most skills out of anyone in the factory. Born on July 30th, 1863 in Dearborn, Michigan, on a farm, Henry Ford spent most of his early life farming. Ford's father did not want Ford to focus on school and only focus on agriculture and to help the farm produce money. Instead, Ford decided to study math and mechanics. Ford left the farm to further his career in mechanics and to build cars. Later on, Ford married his wife, Clara Ford, and moved to Detroit, Michigan. Before Ford started his motor company, he found apprentice work as a machinist. Mr. and Mrs. Ford lived in a one-bedroom apartment in their late teen years in Detroit, Michigan. Ford's first car wasn't the Model T, it was the quadricycle. In 1896, this was a project that he did with hundreds of other people to make the first automobile. Ford was determined to make his own automation company that will be a service to the general public. Ford Motor Company was started to help with the prices of cars for the general public and to fulfill Henry Ford's infatuation with machinery. Just 5 years after Ford invented Ford Motor Company, he created and released the Model T. And this was his 9th car that he created in 5 years since the development of his company. Ford's car was also the best-selling and the most successful vehicle at the time, not only for his company but for the world. Henry Ford had his company up and running. Ford wanted to make a car that was sturdy and cheap. Firstly, the Model T was black and had no other color options, and it was kind of expensive, even though Ford wanted it to be cheaper for the general public. The first Model T was listed at $850, which is $21,000 today. It was pretty cheap, but not for mass production, and this led Ford into coming up with an idea to cut the price down even further. This led Ford to building a new plant in Highland Park, Michigan, and he created a structure that could easily expand as new methods of production were incorporated. And he consulted with Frederick Taylor to examine the most efficient modes of production. Ford observed an assembly concept in the slaughterhouses in the Midwest and the conveyor belt in the Midwest, and he used these ideas to make cars in his factory. The first thing he implemented in the factory was something called gravity slides, which moved the parts from one work area to another. And through the next 3 years, new techniques were added. Moreover, on December 1st, 1913 was the first large-scale assembly line. Furthermore, the assembly line had a contraption of chains and links that made the Model T move in a flow. And the manufacturing of the car could be broken down into 84 steps. But the key of the process was interchangeable parts. No other vehicles but the Model T had interchangeable parts, and that meant that the valves, gas tanks, tires, etc. could be put on different Model Ts. Parts were created in mass quantities and brought to the workers. The chassis of the car was pulled down a 150-foot line by a chain conveyor, and the 140 workers put their parts on the car. However, the workers brought pieces to different stations so that the station wouldn't run out of stock on the parts that they had to put on. The assembly decreased the amount of time to make a Model T by a lot and increased the profit of the company. These profits allowed Ford to let his workers get paid $5 a day and only work 8 hours a day instead of 9. Raising the salary of his workers was all a part of Ford's plan of having his own workers buy the cars that they were making, and in the long run, this helped Ford earn even more money than he was already making. Ford was a mastermind and made this assembly line work for his company in every aspect of the automobile industry. The assembly line has been noticed worldwide and has been in the newspapers since Ford launched it, and this made his business grow even more. A huge short-term impact, which was in 1914, a year after the assembly line was invented. Ford had the most cars produced and had 308,162 vehicles made. These results helped Ford have a more significant profit margin, and the Model T dropped to just $260, which is around $3,500 today. And this helped the general public have more access to buying a car. Also, a long-term impact was that the assembly line was revolutionary to the world because it started a new idea to produce products faster in every industry. The interchangeable parts of the Model T created a continuous workflow and helped the laborers spend more time on tasks, which resulted in higher quality of a product, the Model T. The production time became more efficient and went from over 12 hours to making the car to just 93 minutes.
Under the old stationary system, the record time for assembling a car had been 12 hours and 13 minutes. Using the assembly line process, it took 1 hour and 33 minutes. By the fall of 1913, Ford had established the first automobile assembly line in the world and controlled nearly half the American car market. Henry Ford had achieved his coveted goal. His company was now producing 1,000 cars a day.
The assembly line was great for the world, and Henry Ford is the one that conducted the greatness of it. This was a triumph and tragedy because the assembly line had an achievement of making a more productive way of building products. The assembly line made it easier to be replaced by someone else, and the skilled workers weren't needed anymore to get the task done. I am James Snowden, and thank you for watching this video.